Thanks, everyone. We are, it's an understatement to say we are excited about this release. We are hard at work. You can figure out from our faces. A little tiring, but it's a good time. So we are really excited, and it's good to see a lot of people joining as well in the meetup. How about we're going to talk about the 0.9 release. So in this part, so we are doing monthly releases. We extend a little bit for this release to make it extra special. So what we are doing right now, so we start off, APIs, standard schemas and everything else, and connectors. A lot of good, I keep getting interrupted in between. Who are jumping, I'm admitting it. So if I'm focusing elsewhere, so pardon me. So yeah, we built the core of functionality from last 6+ months and kind of continue to improve every month. Every month there is a release that is going out with great features. And this time we said, let's kick up a notch in that, we released previously an activity feed, which is more of a built up feed based on the change events that are happening in your metadata. Now we want to make that a collaborative feature. What that means, now you can see activity feeds. Along with that, you can actually reply to those feeds. You can have conversations around feeds, right? That's one part. Next is the business glossary. This is one of the most asked features from the very beginning. I think Suresh spent extra time and actually researching how to make glossary work for everyone, right? So glossaries often is not very well taken care of, and we kind of put a lot of thought into it and what that makes special for OpenMetadata, and we're going to demo that. Lastly, data quality, data profiler. So we had a profiler from, I think, 0.4 release onwards. We continue to improve, continue to iterate on that aspects and have more coverage on that. But one of the aspects that from the beginning, we are saying that, hey, having a profile is great, but we should allow users to kind of create tests around it, capture those results, and understand when the test fails, why it fails, and how to fix it, right? So we are making a huge stride in that aspect in this release. And as always, one of the things we always do with the connectors is like, what is the OpenMetadata core functionality to bring metadata from various sources into a central place, right? So we continue to increase our connector coverage, and by far the number of connectors in this release is going to be far exceeded from last few releases. I think we added around 10+. I'm going to get my count wrong there, but a lot of coverage had happened. So in total, we have around 47 connectors that's connecting to various data sources. So in case if you don't see anything that that you needed, please come file a ticket for us and we'll add it. And the last part is the Lineage. So Lineage is central part of the OpenMetadata, of course. So we built Lineage using Airflow Lineage backend. Then we built one of the industry first manual lineage editor that is to bring users' knowledge into the lineage. So as a user, you're collecting the lineage automatically, but you know that this table should be connected to this ETL pipeline, or this table should connect to this dashboard. So we added in 0.8 release manual lineage editor, a drag and drop editor, right? So this release, we are adding expanding the automatic lineage coverage by passing the query processing logs. So anything from Snowflake to BigQuery to MS SQL and all that, we process the query logs, we connect the nodes, and we show this automated lineage within the OpenMetadata. So those are kind of high-level features. There are many other things that went in, hard to capture. But without further ado, I think I'll give it to Shannon, who will do the demo.
Thanks, Harsha. Can I share my screen?
Right. Yeah, enable it.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, can folks see that okay? Font big enough? Okay, great. As always, engineers and others involved with the OpenMetadata project, please feel free to jump in if you've got a comment or anything to add as I move through this demo. So, as Harsha mentioned, as part of the 07 release, we introduced activity feeds based on change events that are being generated by a bot or user activity within OpenMetadata. So activity feeds are populated by changes such as updates to descriptions, schema changes, other events. And you'll see those in feeds that look like this. We can filter these in various ways. In the 09 release, we've enabled collaboration in real time or asynchronously via conversation threads. Conversation threads facilitate questions, feedback, suggestions from data users to really help an organization ensure they're getting their data right for their users. So let's take a look at what conversation threads look like in OpenMetadata for the 09 release. Okay. All right, so there are a number of places where you'll see the opportunity to create a conversation thread pop up. We have it here in the table description. You've got an opportunity to kick off a conversation. There's opportunity here with descriptions at the column level. And then we also have discussion threads that pertain to tags, to events, changes on tags. So what you'll see is that there are discussion threads that pop up with an initial comment, all right? And you can kick one of those off yourself with a simple comment. All right, and that will create a conversation. We'll see that the discussion thread has one comment in it so far, the one that I just made. You can also reply to in a discussion thread and add to the discussion around a particular entity, a data value in OpenMetadata. So in this case, I might want to make the comment that I think this is the wrong tag here. The idea with conversation threads really is that we are encouraging collaboration around the data within an organization. Okay, so you'll see my reply pop up here in the discussion thread. And the overall UI for these is such that as I continue to make additional comments, you'll see those in a nested fashion underneath the initial comment, but we don't have the kind of deep nesting that you might see in some interfaces. So overall, it's a little bit easier to parse what's happening. So you'll also see conveniences that are part of this conversation thread interface. So for example, here, because there is no description for this particular column, the conversation thread prompt is preloading a comment, and that is a request for description. And note that the request is being sent directly to the team that owns this particular asset, in this case, the data platform team. So you can mention individuals and teams within discussion threads that you kick off. In addition, so let's go ahead and create that. Okay. Fires that one off. If I want to draw attention to an individual, what I could do here is, oops, this isn't what I meant to click on. What I could do here is follow. There. Follow up my initial comment here and mention Harsha, who created it. As an mention of that particular individual. So something else I can do is I can actually mention individual assets as part of a comment. So here I can ask the data platform team, again, to create a description for this missing description. And then I can ask, it's a foreign key reference to, and once I type the hash key, then I'll get some suggestions around assets that I can specifically reference here. So, so in this case, I think that this is possibly a foreign key reference to dim address. So I'm going to call that out and mention that in my comment. All right, and then as we see, that comment lives on. We've got an explicit mention of a particular team and of a particular asset. And we can click through those to learn a little bit more about any of those as users participate in this conversation. Okay, so one thing that's important to note about conversation threads in OpenMetadata is that these conversations belong to the data asset. The people involved in a conversation are not based in some discussion channel. Rather, only people with some relationship to the asset will be in the conversation. So data owners, anyone who's following a particular asset, or those who've created or were mentioned in conversation threads. So to give you an idea of the attachment between conversation threads and assets, we can take a look at the activity feed for this asset. And you'll note that what's happening here is that those individual comments that I was making on columns and other places within the fact order table are all rolling up into a single activity feed for this particular table. The idea here is that we want to encourage participation in discussion around this asset. And so we're bringing all of those discussion threads together right here in association with this asset. It's possible.
One quick comment there, Shannon. So far, right, all this information about data is the responsibility of data producers alone, right? And what ends up happening is producers sometimes have the context, they don't have the context, they're just maintaining the data, ETL pipelines. This is one, getting all the organizational knowledge, right? Collectively as an organization, you can keep improving your data, right? So that means a data scientist who understands a column really well can actually provide some suggestions, comments to continuously improve the data. The second thing that we often see, we all have experienced this. A lot of data related conversations end up happening in Slack, emails, and hallway conversations. That is a knowledge that, related to a data that is lost, right, for an organization. This is a way for everybody to participate around the data, provide their feedback, provide the suggestions, and continuously improve the data. But so that's the reason why all of this knowledge is tracked against a data asset that you can take a look at and then continue to improve your data and the data understanding. But sorry, Shannon, just chime in.
No, not at all. Great, great ads. Appreciate you jumping in with that, Suresh. Okay, so as I mentioned, all of this discussion and collaboration around this asset rolls up to this activity feed for the asset. You'll also see it rolling up to your activity feed, your main activity feed that is part of the landing page that you'll see when you log into OpenMetadata. And something else to call out here is that you can interact with these threads. Note that there's multiple threads in this case across the assets that I have a relationship to one way or another. And I can jump into any one of those threads from the activity feed and participate in the discussion at that moment as well. So there, wherever you're at in the UI, for the most part, you have an opportunity to collaborate around the data that you're looking at that moment. Okay, so going forward, users will be able to resolve threads, so only active threads are open. I guess one more thing I'll call out before moving on too much further is that this interface for conversation threads is present across topics, dashboards, and pipelines. All right, it's not isolated just to tables. So we have an opportunity to add comments, etc., on a pipeline in the same way that we could, say, in a table.
Awesome.
Okay. So one thing that I think is important to call out here also is that there is API support that'll enable a variety of integrations, for example, with webhooks and Slack. Conversations can be used to capture knowledge and enhance understanding across your organization. In future releases, users or data owners will be able to flag certain threads and pin them on the entity page. We'll work on providing the ability to convert the conversation threads into tasks as well, so that we can nurture collaboration towards an improvement or action around a particular asset. Okay. So that is a quick tour of data collaboration and new enhancements that we're adding in OpenMetadata 09 release. Next thing I'd like to move on to, following the outline that Harsha laid out, is glossaries. So glossaries are something that is a work in progress, very much a work in progress in the 09 release. But in 09, we can access glossaries from the settings tab. And depending on your level of access, you can view or participate in developing a glossary. So glossaries are a type of, for those of you who aren't as familiar with what a glossary is, glossaries are a type of controlled vocabulary in an organization that we'd use to define concepts and terminologies specific to, say, a certain domain. Here we've got 3 different domains represented. A glossary helps establish consistent meaning to terms and to define them in a central place to establish a common understanding and build a knowledge base. So glossary terms can also help us organize or discover data entities. So assets that are associated, related terms and assets are something that we're capturing here within the initial glossary implementation that we have in OpenMetadata as of the 09 release. Something that's important to keep in mind is that, and the reason, a motivation behind this is that every table and other data assets are a source of core business concepts. For a little bit of background, OpenMetadata uses a thesaurus to build a glossary. In a thesaurus, the terms are organized hierarchically with equivalent and associative relationships. So you'll see some of that reflected here in the way that this glossary is laid out, in that there's hierarchy between the domains and the individual terms that are defined within those domains. So
quickly, Shannon. So for example, let's look at this monthly recurring revenue, right? It's a definition. So the concept of monthly recurring revenue has a preferred term, right, which is monthly recurring revenue. But then you can also call other things, right, within your organization. So MRR is one of the acronyms. You could have other names. So you have synonyms here. You can build references to external glossaries. So if you look at that sales glossary, Shannon, can you click the reference? No, on the right-hand side at the top.
Click the reference. Says sales glossary.
Yeah, so you can build link to references, right? Go back. And then finally, there are related terms, right? So these related terms are related in some way or the other, right? So this is going to help you starting with one concept and understanding and exploring related concepts. And then also when you are exploring from monthly recurring revenue concept, you can look at the assets, right? And so now you are discovering your data, starting with a concept, not with a keyword, right? So that's information related to the glossary. So, and then you can use glossary for tagging your data sets so that they become assets associated with your glossary, and then glossary terms are used to describe your data precisely.
Great, thanks, Suresh. Only thing I would add there is just kind of a wrap up, and that is that in general, glossaries are important for data discovery, for search and retrieval, and exploration through, say, some higher level concept, and that all of this is going to help us with data governance. Okay, any other thoughts or comments on the data glossary? Okay. All right, so next, I'd like to move on to discussing the data profiler and data quality and the features as we've rolled them out in the 09 release. So for this, I'm going to transition to a local instance of OpenMetadata that I have running here, because I'm going to need to interact with it at in a more intimate way. So just get to the example table. Okay. All right. So OpenMetadata includes a data profiler component that assesses assets and computes metrics that summarize data. And we can see some of those metrics reflected here, as well as some indicators on the null percentage, how many are unique, distinct percentage, et cetera. These are all metrics that the profiler, the OpenMetadata profiler, is collecting as it assesses assets and computes these metrics. The intent is to give you the sense, give you the opportunity to provide a summary of data that allows you to assess quality at one level, look for anything that stands out as unusual. So in previous releases, the data profiler ran together with metadata ingestion, and as a consequence, delayed the ingestion process. So because profiling is computationally expensive and time consuming, we've separated profiling metadata extraction and data profiling into separate jobs. The ingestion job now extracts metadata from sources and updates the entity instances in the OpenMetadata catalog. That's where we get tables, dashboards, topics, pipelines, and all of their components, such as columns in the case of tables. The profiling job extracts metrics from SQL sources and configures and runs data quality tests. And it's data quality tests that we really want to focus on here. Quality tests are a brand new feature we're introducing with the 09 release. When we run ingestion jobs, we get all the metadata about databases, tables, columns, column descriptions, et cetera. The profiler runs on all those tables that we're fetching data for and collects a number of metrics, as we've discussed. You can configure data profiling to run only on specific tables instead of all tables, and generally configure profiling using the same settings as for ingestion workflows. With the 09 release, we're continuing with an emphasis on data quality with the addition of tests, because tests play an important role in making any asset trustworthy. Currently, data quality is supported only in the context of these quality metrics that the profiler collects. So in effect, metrics are the primary building blocks of OpenMetadata's profiler. We can define quality tests at the table and column levels from the UI or in a profiler workflow configuration. So we're going to look at examples of both of those. Once you've created tests, in order to run those tests, you'll need to deploy the workflows on Airflow directly using the Airflow SDK, and we've got examples of that in the docs, or use the OpenMetadata ingestion CLI to run the workflow manually. And I'll show examples of that. So let's add some tests to explore this new feature a bit, and we're going to add them here on this table. So status for orders tells us what status an order exists in. Let's go ahead and use the UI to add a test. The UI will give us an opportunity to select from a range of options for test type. We're going for this one, we're going to use column values to be not in a set. And we can include a description here. I'm going to skip that for now. The value that we want to make sure a value does not have is the value of failed. And I'm going to go ahead and save that test. Okay. I'm going to add a couple more tests. I'm going to add a couple that should pass and one that will fail, and then we'll run the profiler to execute those tests, and we can see the result. So going back to the profiler tab, I'm going to take a look at, in this case, adding a test at the table level. So we added a test previously here for status from this column by clicking the Add Test button. We can add tests at the table level directly from the Data Quality tab. And I do that by using the Add Test button. And I'm going to add a table level test. So in this case, I want my table column count test to run. And the value that I'm going to specify here is this table has 9 columns, and I don't want that to change. So I want to ensure that I'm not seeing a change. And so I'm going to create a test to ensure that the number of columns remains at 9. All right, so now I've added a table level test, and note that that's added here as a entry in my data quality page. Finally, to show you one more type of test, I'm going to add a column test on coupon amount. And for this test, I want the values for every entry in this column in the table to be between 2 values. Note that as I'm changing between different test types, the additional fields that I have here in creating a test change depending on what type of test I select. So I want to enforce that coupons are never greater than 25%. So I'm going to specify that all coupons should be between 0 and 25. Okay. Now, having added all of those tests, the next thing that I need to do, those are the 3 tests that I'm interested in adding at this point. I have 2 options for running these tests. One is that I can use the OpenMetadata CLI. Okay, so at this point, I think it's reasonable for us to go to the docs. And let's take a quick look at our options here. So we can deploy directly on Airflow. We've got the documentation for that. We would create a config file and then run it using a script like this. We drop the config here and go ahead and run it. Alternatively, what we can do is we can use the metadata CLI to run, and the process is similar in that we still need to create a config file. We just run it from the command line interface. So what I'd like to call your attention to is the fact that the configuration that you're going to generate here is going to look very similar to the type of config that you'll put together to run metadata ingestion. In this case, what we do is we will add a test suite as part of the config. Okay, so what I've done in order to run these tests is I've created a test suite in a config file for Redshift. All of those tests that I ran were in the orders table. What I want to do is show you what it would be like to add similar tests on a different table, in this case, raw orders. All right. The principle is the same. With the test suite, I'm going to create a set of tests. I'm going to have, in the case of this particular config, no table tests. All right. But I am going to add one additional column test, and that is for the raw orders table in Redshift. On the user ID column, I want to ensure that the user IDs are between 0 and 99 as a test case. All right, I'm using the column values to be between. So this is very similar to the test that we created here, column values to be between, where we're constraining how much the coupons can be for orders. Okay, so I use this example to point out a couple of things about how tests are designed to work with this release of OpenMetadata. The tests can be added either using using a JSON config file that is supplied either through the metadata command line interface or put directly onto Airflow using the Airflow SDK, or I can create tests in the OpenMetadata UI. All of those tests are added to whatever asset they're associated with as part of the metadata catalog, regardless of how they were created, whether via a config file in CLI or in the UI. Then when we run our ingestion, our profiler task, what will happen is all of those tests will be applied, those from the JSON config and those from the UI, and run against the relevant tables. So this file that we just looked at here is my Redshift _profiler file, the one that I'm going to run here. And running this will execute both the tests I created in the UI and the test that I'm creating as part of the config for this in this JSON file. So we just watch as this runs. And you can see mention of some of the tests that I applied as we look through the output. So while that's running, one thing I should mention is that tests currently run on predefined metrics, all of which, we got a question, Kurt?
Yeah, two questions real quick. When you add it through the JSON file, does it then show up in the GUI? And should you remove it from the JSON file so it doesn't overwrite every time?
No, I can jump in. So yeah, so our idea is mainly to encourage people to add the test from the UI itself. But there are always cases where users want to make this code and check into the code or whatnot. So we will allow that option as well. But it reconciles everything. So even if you remove it, it's there on the UI side. So UI being open metadata being with a single store, and the true the central repository for all the metadata. So we're going to store it there. So if you disable from the UI, then it will be gone. But anything you remove from the configs or not, it will still be there.
Okay, so if I disable it in the UI, but it's still in my config file, will that essentially re-enable it?
No, right now we're not going to, because we're going to honor the config side on the open metadata side. But something that we can take a feedback on. How do you approach on this?
So, Harsha, I think there is UI and then there is code, right? Code can independently continue to evolve. UI can also evolve. I think we should just reconcile and keep it, consolidated as we continue to iterate on this.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be two kinds of developer workflows, right? People who are comfortable doing everything from open metadata UI, but then there could be developers that might be doing this right in, let's say, their GitHub repo.
Yeah. So I think the central motivation here, right? So you have tests somewhere in the code, and but nobody's actually looking at the definition except the selected few people. But as a consumer, hey, I'm using this particular data. I'm expecting my dashboard to have these values between min and max. But you're running tests somewhere else. So the idea here for us is to take the test definitions, provide that in the open metadata for everyone to view. So that's where we're coming from, but definitely this is a good feedback.
What tests are run and what guarantees are provided in terms of the correctness itself is a super important metadata for not just people who are maintaining the quality, even for people who are consuming the data, right? So
yeah.
Okay, so if we go back into the open metadata UI, actually, let me call out one other thing. So what I did here was I ran the tests from the CLI, and you'll note that this says the workflow finished with failures. So if we look at the output here, we can see that one of the tests we specified failed. This is column values between 0 and 25. This is the coupon test that we applied. That one failed. The rest passed, otherwise we would see them noted as failures. But we get a nice call out here that we did have one test that failed. And in the UI, we see a similar presentation. Two of the tests that we just created passed for this particular table, and the coupon test failed, and we get a description that indicates why it failed. This found a min of 0 and a max of 26, the expected being min of 0 and max of 25. Okay, so you can go in and edit tests here in the UI. Maybe it actually should be up as high as 30. We can go in and change that. We can also delete any of these tests that we would like to delete, or as becomes necessary. Okay, so tests currently are based on these building block metrics, predefined metrics that that I led off this piece discussing. We can, in future releases, Open Metadata will support custom metrics to provide even greater flexibility in how you build tests. We'll also create alert notifications around test cases, and those will be part of the various feeds that you can attend to. I do see a question in chat.
I think there is a question about is data quality behind our back already. Not right now, so we are going to add those operations.
Hey. Excuse me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask, what is this about?
It's an open source, OpenMetadata community right now. We are having a meeting. So,
Wait, I can't understand what you're saying.
Okay, I think we posted the Zoom in
Twitter.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I think the answer is we're going to work on this, Siddharth, and we'll add that.
Okay. All right. With the time remaining, I want to talk a little bit about the Lineage updates that we made in the 09 release. So there are two types of lineage that are added in this release. I think the easiest way, or the way that one way of thinking about this is within a given asset, if you've got queries that are, say, creating views based on other tables, or if you have tables that are being used as part of a create statement, table columns that are being used as part of a create statement to create other tables, we want to capture that with the lineage updates that we've made in the 09 release. So for a whole host of connectors, we've added support for that type of lineage, both for where views come from and where tables come from, if they're composed of, say, columns or other pieces of existing tables. What I'd like to do is take a look at doing some metadata ingestion for Snowflake that will illustrate how this works. So we'll do this through adding a service, an additional service, and I'm going to go ahead and add a Snowflake. All right. Snowflake 2. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip through this as quickly as I can. We're going to add, hello? Someone need to mute?
Yeah, I'm muted.
All right. All right, so this UI will allow me to add an additional data service. And as part of ingestion, we will pick up additional lineage information that we, up to this release, haven't been able to pick up. So all right. So with that, then I will create this service, and I'm going to apply a schema filter pattern to limit what's being pulled in. And I will ingest sample data and then go ahead and kick this off. Okay. So once this finishes running, okay, what I can do here then is I can take a look at Snowflake assets. All right. And I'm going to take a look at test view. Okay, the reason I'm doing this is because this is there we go. This is a test view that we created specifically to illustrate the existence of a view based on two different tables. Okay, so this run of the Snowflake ingestion captured the fact that this view is derived from two different tables. And we're seeing that reflected here in our lineage for this particular view. So what we have in this release with view and table definition lineage support. So for queries that we see like this, something along these lines, in a given data source, we can capture lineage information and reflect, store it in the metadata catalog and reflect it to users in the UI. The integrations that we've added this functionality to include connectors for all of these sources. And this will be highlighted and summarized. You'll have a chance to come back to this and take a closer look in the release blog post that's coming out and the documentation that we're prepping for this release. So that's all I have. Harsha or Suresh, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So on the lineage is going to be a story for us that's continuously improved, continuously added new changes and stuff. So it will be great to get feedback from the community. So what we have done, what Shannon demoed is one part of it. That is, hey, you have a lot of data within the Snowflake. We are analyzing the queries, kind of creating the relation between those tables, views, and everything else. Like view lineage that you've seen is actually coming from the view definition itself. We're parsing the SQL query and associating what are the upstream table that the view depends on. Similarly, between the tables, we actually process all the logs and like insert into, create as select those kind of queries and analyze this as a lineage and publish into Elastic OpenMetadata. We had this coverage on multiple connectors, not just for Snowflake. We do this for BigQuery, Redshift, MySQL, and all the other things where we can capture the logs. So also, we already had the Airflow lineage backend that captures the lineage based on the inlets and outlets that you tag in your pipelines. And we are going to add Spark lineage and other improvements continuously as the releases comes on from next releases, and also work on column level lineage. That's one thing that we continue to kind of focus on. And there is a lot of innovation that's going to happen based on the lineage, right? Once you have column level lineage, you can actually propagate the tags, propagate the description. A lot of these can be automated. So those are the things that we want to bring to the OpenMetadata as well. And to capture the data quality, so you've seen the test definitions, right? I think anyone familiar with Great Expectation can actually see the commonality between that. The reason for that is, hey, Great Expectation is getting a lot of traction, and however, the definitions itself is not properly tied. So what we have done is we work with the Great Expectations team a little bit in the open source and got those schemas, got the test definition to JSON schemas. So we can continue to add, continue to evolve on the data quality there, add more tests. Secondly, we want to allow users to quickly say that, hey, I have this test, I'm going to add this test, and I'm going to want to run it, right? So we want to do this interaction through the UI, just like you've seen in the ingestion. Ingestion is the one-time setup where you can go and create the service and set up the ingestion through the UI. Like, previously you have to do either SDK pipeline or run the metadata command. Everything is driven through the UI. One of the aspects we continue to focus is on making it easier and take away the burden of, hey, all of these things need to set up. Imagine a data consumer who probably doesn't have access to all of these things, coming to OpenMetadata UI and creating a test and seeing the results, not just seeing the results and kind of getting notified if the test fails or whatnot, through the activity feed to the Slack is going to be like, pretty amazing, right? So as a consumer, I'm a data scientist, I just want to play with the dashboards. Don't ask me to try to Airflow pipeline, understand all this code, right? Now I can actually go and do this through the UI. So that's where we are heading towards.
It's sort of like zero code, right? Test. But if you want to do, code-based tests, both of those things are available here.
One more point I want to kind of shout out here is that most of the tooling that available in the data quality space is kind of, to an extent, it's kind of a JUnit kind of an approach where you write a test in the language you run it, and it provides a report for it. But it's not a report that, yes, people can work around and host it, but it's not a report that you can interact with, right? So we are making extra effort there to provide all of this in a time series fashion within the UI. The UI that you have seen is kind of a stepping stone, and we're going to evolve much faster into the next releases onwards. And you'll see like much more transformative UI there to show like when the test failed, can you rerun the test if the backfill is succeeded and all that stuff, right? So that's the data quality, and this is a journey, and it will be great to have the community kind of giving us feedback and using it and telling us what working, what doesn't work for us for the integrations. And walking backwards, Glossary, that's again, we did a lot of work there, and any changes that need to be done in terms of the UX and UI, that's going to come in next iterations. And we want to continue to evolve. We want to kind of supply the default glossaries that might be useful for in the different industries. And finally, activity feed. So activity feed is an evolution and collaboration evolution, right? So we've seen the activity feed as a system of record. Now this is a feed you actually can interact. The great thing here again, as a collaboration aspect, when you have producers and consumers in the same space, asking questions, resolving questions, and providing knowledge, you actually improve the metadata. Now you're actually adding context about the metadata. Why this column is added? What type of column is this? Where it can be used, what kind of queries we can use, right? So those are the things that are actually available, and you can actually ask people these questions within the open metadata and get the answers right there. So next time I come back to that entity or whatnot, I can see this conversation. I don't need to kind of chase people around and trying to find that information. Again, this is, we are just opening up the collaboration aspects. As Suresh pointed out, we're going to make this turning into tasks so that, hey, Harsha, you are the owner of table Y. Why don't you please go and add a description, right? That becomes a task for me. I need to kind of resolve that, right? So those are the important things that we want to kind of evolve towards that.
So these are going to be some micro workflows. So in the past, in the companies that I work for, people would actually go create a Jira ticket and then say a description needs to be added for this column. Of course, nobody looks at the Jira tickets. And then, if somebody is looking at it, he adds a description, he doesn't resolve the Jira tickets. And then, after a while, all these Jira tickets are accumulating, and then, nobody really updates anything. And then people just lose hope of getting description at all. And they stop, creating Jira tickets. But this is a way of, I think if you're seeing open metadata shaping up where we are organizing data for people. But then the other way, we are organizing people for data, right? You can see that, those two things that are happening hand in hand, right? So that is, this is the beginning of the journey. But I think, this will be super exciting as, these micro workflows, interactions between people, all of those things happens around data, right? And then we capture more and more of the knowledge of data and organize it for everybody, right? So that is where we are going. So this is just the start of the journey.
Siddharth, I think you asked a question about love to means to generate one-time historical lineage generator from account usage. Yeah, that's definitely that we can do. It will be great to connect with you and kind of understand the use case and add that into Snowflake Connector, definitely.
And you talked about integrating great expectations for data quality, right, Harsha? Like, are there any plans to look at Monte Carlo and like another data observability or quality product out there?
Definitely. So again, with OpenMetadata, we are making schema first, API first for everything. So we want to integrate existing tools, existing mechanism that our users or customers are using already and can publish those quality signals. So definitely, if something that's API-wise is not flexible enough for you, definitely get in touch with us. We are open to kind of feedback there and improve. Our goal is for API to be platform or tool agnostic, so that not just our tooling works, can any other tooling works, right? So we want to make OpenMetadata work for everyone. So again, it's not an expectation.
We want to model the rich world of metadata and provide APIs through which you can publish all this metadata. right? So any tool, right? The whole idea here is open metadata standards will make metadata shareable between tools. And then so tools should be able to publish the observability related metadata, quality related metadata. Tomorrow, some amazing tool comes up. They can also publish and provide great experience for the solution that they are building, maybe observability, but then it's all visible in a single place. So that is the whole idea.
Excellent. Thanks, Suresh. I have another question regarding what was that, like suggestions around metadata for tables or columns. So you showcased how we can start a thread, discussion thread, and suggest specific description. So would there be a suggestion flow where we can go ahead and make a change or add a description to a table or column, and the owner kind of gets notified and approves it? Like
that is a a great comment. So I'll give you one example just to tie it to reality. A lot of times data scientists are using some data and then description has a grammatical error or something, okay, some typo.
Yeah.
And, they could have just fixed it, right? As an organization, you should be able to collaborate and get your data better. But instead, they have to create Jira tickets in the current world, right? And so over a period of time, they keep seeing this grammatical error. It keeps, making them go crazy, right? And so, request description is the first step, right? Now we will say suggest tags, suggest descriptions, all kinds of stuff, right? In fact, people should be able to add tests saying, I am a data consumer. I'm making this assumption on your data. Let me add a test so that if you break that assumption, the test fails, and then, we can have a talk, right, before you publish the data. So suggestion is going to be a big thing for us. And the way suggestion should work is you suggest, and then somebody can say accept or, say, or reject, right? Or, say, I'm going to make an improvement over what suggestion you have made and then accept it. Those kind of micro workflows should happen right here. That is what we call as collaboration. So when you suggest, when you ask, it becomes tasks. Tasks can be resolved, right? And all the tasks will be in your My Data page show up saying, hey, you have all these tasks. And then these tasks are this old. And then we can start saying, hey, these tasks, we can nudge people saying your tasks are, older than this number of days. And then you can, when the suggestion comes in, you can accept it, or augment it, right? And those are micro workflows.
Cool.
Okay, I think we have run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
One last thing, please come to our Slack channel, give us feedback. And if you're doing a POC or anything, get in touch with us in support channel. We are pretty much available 24/7. And, we want to make OpenMetadata work for you. So please get in touch.
Spread the word about the projects and start the GitHub project so that the word gets spread. So today,
automation
I'm saying a lot of cyclical things. So,
so when is OpenMetadata 9 coming out, guys?
So we're going to publish the binaries tomorrow.
Okay.
We're going to set up the sandbox as well. So, and along with Docker images.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll announce in Slack. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate taking your time to join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.